Welcome to Breaking Doctrine, presented to you by the Combined Arms Doctrine Directorate at the Combined Arms Center at Fort Leavenworth, Kansas. The views expressed here are those of the individual and do not represent the views of the Combined Arms Center, U.S. Army, or U.S. government.
Welcome to Breaking Doctrine, a U.S. Army Combined Arms Center podcast on emerging doctrine and the Army's vision of warfare. Hello, I'm Lieutenant Colonel Jessamyn Jempson, and on this episode of Breaking Doctrine, we'll be talking about the Command and General Staff College, or CGSC. So you've been selected to attend Resident CGSC. Now what? What can you expect, and how should you prepare for what's been called the best year of your Army career? Joining me today are Major Jesse Davis and Major Ian Staley, both of whom recently graduated from CGSC. We're also joined by Colonel Retired Micah Gibler, an instructor at CGSC. Gentlemen, welcome to the show.
Good to be here. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, man. Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
So to kick things off, I'd like to give our guests an opportunity to introduce themselves and give us a quick snapshot of your background. Mr. Gibler, can we start with you?
Thank you very much, ma'am. Good to be here. Graduated from Texas A&M University in 1986 as an infantryman. Standard path, not standard for me, 82nd, 101st, 25th, involved in the Just Cause, the first Gulf War, Afghanistan, Iraq. Retired in 2014 after 28 years, spent some time in the civilian sector, and then came here as an instructor in 2019.
Major Davis.
Thanks, ma'am. Jesse Davis, degreed engineer, branched engineer out of OCS. I've done a little bit of everything. Got some heavy time up front at Fort Riley, got some Pacific time out there with the 130th, and then I did a couple different tours with United States Corps of Engineers.
Yeah, man, I'm happy to be here. Major Ian Staley. I'm an infantryman commissioned from the University of Utah ROTC program. I've been fortunate to have a lot of different experience from across the unit spectrum for the infantry world, light, heavy, striker, and security force assistance. I've spent about half of my career overseas doing different tours across Korea, Afghanistan, a lot of Europe, and Southcom.
Thank you all. So established at Fort Leavenworth, Kansas in 1881, the U.S. Army Command and General Staff College is responsible for educating, training, and developing leaders for multi-domain operations in a joint interagency, intergovernmental, and multinational operational environment. It also advances the art and science of the profession of arms in support of Army operational requirements. CGSC is a military graduate school for United States Army and sister service officers, also interagency representatives and international military officers. It provides advanced military education to mid-career officers, typically majors, preparing them for senior leadership roles and responsibilities. Army majors are required to complete CGSC in one of three ways. The first option is resident attendance at the Command and General Staff Officers course. This is a 44-week course that starts in July of each year. The course includes over 150 elective courses and focus programs in areas like special, joint, or space operations. The second option for completing CGSC is through a satellite program located at one of several campuses across the country. And finally, the third option, which we affectionately refer to as the box of books, that is done by online and correspondence training. So I want to focus on the resident version of the course today with the three of you. Mr. Gibler, let's start with you. Can you explain to our listeners how CGSC is organized? How does it work? And maybe what can students expect the first couple of weeks?
I can attempt to. It just like any organization, there are some complexities to it. But the resident course is really structured around modules of instruction. So we start off at the front end, and the students will hear things like, C100, C200, C300, which gets after the core curriculum. Core curriculum is usually focused on at the front end, critical thinking, creative thinking, setting the stage academically for students to then be able to progress throughout the rest of the academic year. a lot coming at the students right at the front end. So I think I think Jesse and Ian will kind of talk that a little bit. But the intent is here to give them a couple of weeks to stabilize themselves back in an academic environment and then talk through the expectations. We then roll into most of the core curriculum that gets after what we call JPME, Joint Professional Military Education 1. And it really gets after understanding the strategic and operational environment. So we start the national security strategy, work our way down through strategic documents into kind of combatant commanders, planning guidance. We then transition into understanding the joint partners in C200, C300, and then the joint planning process in C500. And amongst that, you have history, you have leadership, you have sustainment, you have force management, again, all really at the strategic operational level. And then what does the Army provide the Joint Force Commander? We then, and that ends, that capstones in the fall with what's called X100. It's a oral comprehensive exam and, of course, a multiple choice exam that's married up with that. And then we make a transition kind of right before the Christmas break into the Army basic course, the advanced operation course, really, which gets after getting people branch or Army qualified, and that pushes all the way through, early April. And it's a series of courses and practical exercises that drive the students through multiple MDMP iterations that go through offense, defense, and a variety of other operational factors. The back end of that, you finish up with what's called M400. It's a multi-week event that gets after division-level offensive operation. So we've we've moved the students from strategic to operational to division, and now they're planning and fighting at the division level. The last 2 months of the course are electives. You mentioned that, the 150 options that are there. Lots of electives, lots of tracks you can follow for the students. So, and I think Jesse or Ian will kind of tug on this a bit. Exciting, not something you need to worry about up front. There's plenty of other stuff you got to do up front. So that's generally how the resident course is broken down, and from an academic point of view. From a structure point of view, they're going to come in as part of a staff group, one of 4 staff groups that are in a teaching team. It's called a section. Ours was 15, and the staff group was 15 Bravo. And then that teaching team includes people from all of the academic disciplines: joint, tactics, leadership, history, and force management system. So in that, they're trying to achieve about 16 per staff group. And with that, it's multiple warfighting functions, as big of a representation as we can get from the Army students. And then we try to get 2 international students, and we try to get 2 sister service or Department of Defense students in there as well. So you really have 12 Army students, 2 sister service, and then 2 international. And you stay in that staff group all the way through electives, and then electives you kind of starburst out and then just go where they elect.
Yeah, I'll talk about just a couple things here that I think are really important. Is the sheer numbers that come to this college. We're talking about thousands of people. And you come here with a bunch of friends. I had a bunch of buddies that were like, I'm going to CGSC, and I was so excited. Here's the truth, right? Like, you live in this staff group. Like, that's your bubble. It's 16 people. You guys are best friends or worse enemies. Your decision.
Choose your own adventure.
Choose your adventure, right? And I think it's really fun to just mention that amongst the curriculum, the diversity of what you're learning, that stuff's going to come, right? That's the stuff that up front I'm like overly analytical about. How do I prepare for that? It's coming. The really fun thing to think about is you're the only engineer in there, or you're one of the only infantrymen in there, or you're the one that we talk about sister services. We have one Air Force guy. And so that's like the really cool thing about this place, in my opinion, is that you're like the king of the castle. You're the liaison between your branch and these other people, and you got to represent it really well. And so there's a lot of fun things in there, just adding to the complexity of what it is academically and the amount of people. But truthfully, like, what it boils down to is there's 16 people you're hanging out with, and that's all that really matters here.
Yeah, and you kind of alluded to it. I mean, when you come in here, you may be all that only engineer or only military police officer or whatever. Everybody's going to look at you as the expert in that branch. Okay, whether or not whatever your history has been or whatever your career path has been, they're going to look at you as the expert. And and I give it to our international and our sister service. I mean, we have an Air Force officer that could be a logistician, but we look at them as experts, all Air Force, which I would offer is not fair all the time, but they do a really good job trying to fill that billet.
Yeah, just to expand on that, if we're talking about what you can do now to prepare before you come here, if you don't really understand your job, your function, whatever your branch is, whatever your specialty is yet or now, this is a time to really learn off of that, but you might be coming at a disadvantage. So you want to be trying to understand how that looks now before you get in there, and try to then build off of that and expand upon that, because you're going to be put in these positions with the staff group where you're going to be looked at and asked for all this specific information to be the guy or the gal that knows all of those things.
And a really good example that we had an air defense officer in our staff group. Not a lot of air defense officers that come to CGSC. It's just the numbers in the branch. The Army right now is in this change cycle where we're reinvigorating and reinvesting in air defense. We have a lot of our students coming here with very little understanding of the air defense world and what air defense is going to do for them now and in large-scale combat ops and MDO. So we leaned on him really hard, not only us, but the entire team and multiple people, to not only educate the people about air defense operations, but then to help drive the conversation to get it where we're going to go 10, 20 years down the road. And then in the middle of that, you've got Ukraine happening, and in the middle of that, you've got the Israel and Gaza challenge. Air defense is a huge part of that. UASs are a huge part of that. So it gave us an opportunity to kind of talk through that and play with it, but also realize that there's some gaps there that we got to look through.
Yeah, I'll just add into that too when we're talking about how you represent yourself or your branch or your service. Another key component, I asked this of multiple general officers and mentors, field grade officers that I had been looking to when I found out that I was coming to CGSC, and I was asking, hey, so what should I be reading right now? What should I brush up on or get a little bit more experience on? And some of the answers were all patently the same. These 4 or 5 field manuals, 3.0, 5.0, 2.0, 6.0, 7.0, understood, like that's a routine thing that you're going to hear probably out in the force. I would say get familiar with those. You might not have time to read them cover to cover, not expected of you to have done that when you get here, but to understand what are the roles or the functions of your branch or your specialty in regards to those things. And then to add a layer onto that, you're going to do a lot of MDMP here, so you should understand how, as a maneuverist, I might apply or work in the MDMP process. And then, by the way, we're going to do the joint process, JPP, and that's going to be just slightly different, and you're going to have to think about it more broadly and understand that from the other service components. So come here knowing those things. The school and Lieutenant General Beagle just put out an excellent video, the Level Set PME video, that kind of highlighted some of those things and the way the Army's changing, that highlighted FM 3.0, 2.0, 7.0, and the new ADP 3-13. I understand you're working on the new ADP 3.0. I would highly recommend get familiar with those things before you're here, or if you're on the ground, break them out and understand how to dissect them a little bit so that you know the talking points that are going to be important for you or your weaknesses, so you know what to learn about and think about while you're in class.
So let me ask, I think you've brought up some really interesting challenges that our incoming students need to consider. Being self-aware, knowing where their experience is and maybe where they are inexperienced. And we've talked about professional reading, particularly with the field manuals and some of the Army publications that are out. Major Davis, I'll pick on you. What do you think our incoming students should also be thinking about now, prior to their arrival or immediately upon their arrival, to set themselves up for success?
This is a tough place. I don't know what it is, and that's why we're here, right? Like, there's just not a lot of information on this particular place and what you're going to learn, what you need to know prior to coming sometimes. And so for me, what I would say is you got to embrace that. It's fine, right? Like, there are things that are out of your control that you cannot possibly prepare for prior to coming, and lean into that. So that's the first one. Just acknowledge that. That's good.
Get comfortable with ambiguity.
Yeah, right. Like that's where it starts. And the other thing too is like when you come here, there's so many parallels to what we've already done, right? Like every time you get to a unit, there's ambiguity, right? There's where do I go? Where's the gyms? Where's the chow halls? And then now it's like, okay, like what are we learning, right? And so up front, I would tell you this, there's a lot of parallels there, and then there's some added stress, some positive pressure that's causing you to think about what you're going to do for the next 10, 11 months here. And so for me, if you're going to spend any time up front beyond reading doctrine, because doctrine is fantastic, if there's anything that you're going to do, it's going to be defining success, right? Get that trusted corporate board, whether it's your wife, your kids, it's your mom, your dad, whoever that is, and go, hey, this 11 months is important for me professionally, because it really is. But it's also a time where we don't have to, we're not deploying. There shouldn't be nights where you're at work until 2000. Like, what's success look like for us? And if you can define that up front, the jostling, the mental hurdles that you're going to have to deal with up front of, hey, do I need a master's or do I do 2 masters? Or do I do a certificate program? Do I want to learn a second language? Do I want to do SAMs? All of these questions will tug at you because, I mean, you're here because you're good. You're here because you care.
Major Staley, what would you suggest to our inbound students?
Yeah, I agree a lot with Jesse's sentiments there.
Of course you do.
Understanding yourself, self-awareness is going to be important. You're hearing that a lot in the Army right now, but that's because it's true and it matters. There's some things that are going to be similar to every PCS that you do if you're coming here, right? Getting used, household goods, in processing, understanding the layout, whether you're on post, off post, and all the important things there. The differences that Jesse was starting to highlight would be that you have a lot of options available to you. If you're like me, you're going to try and understand every single one of them, and then you're going to get some sort of decision paralysis maybe, and try to decide what's the optimal course of action for Ian Staley. And then understanding that those opportunities will probably be there after CGSC. This might be the best time to apply to SAMs or to get after learning some other languages and the elective opportunities, but those things won't completely disappear. Educate yourself on that and then find what is the right time for yourself now as you transition, and then just prioritize. If you're here with family, make sure they're set up straight. And if you're not, that you've got the right things in place to facilitate either your own personal comfort and well-being, or if your family's distance, which we had several members of our classmates that had to deal with that, how that looks for you as well. Because like Jesse was saying, you're going to have to lean on the people in your staff group to help you throughout the whole year.
I think that's great advice. Do either of you remember feeling apprehensive last summer when you first arrived?
I would say, of course, there's some apprehension. Whenever you're doing any transition in life, there's some of that there. For me, it was definitely mixed with excitement and interest, wanting to come here. I had desired to come here so that I could continue to progress my career and learn more, but also the opportunities here are going to be exciting / stressful. Adjusting yourself and trying to get into a rhythm and getting into the right mindset is really going to help you be successful in doing that.
Yeah, I think what's really fun about that particular moment, maybe even this year, right? Like, you give Army officers enough time, enough static, right? Like, being stagnant causes reflection. We don't get it a lot in our careers, but when you get it, like, there's aha moments everywhere. This is one of those things in my mind. You're sitting in an auditorium, General Foley's speaking at all of these opportunities, right? He's pushing you at the positive pressure point that says, you're not here to just sit around, right? Like, this is a professional endeavor, and you need to be leaving better than you were coming. And I wholeheartedly agree with that. You can leave those rooms and go, I need to do everything. It's for me, for the Army. And then your wife's like, yeah, of course you do. And then you go, wait a minute, maybe I don't. And I think that what I'm trying to kind of long-windedly get at here is that's translatable for the rest of our careers, I think. Right? You're going to go to work and you're going to go, hey, I need to do everything. Unsure. And I think the people that struggle with it now might be the ones also struggling through our next positions.
Yeah, I'll just add personal anecdote. I struggled initially with trying to decide what additionally I wanted to do while I was here. You have the MMAS option, a Master's of Military Arts and Science option that's extra work, extra writing on top of the regular CGSC curriculum. You have the ability to take additional masters at KU or apply for SAMs. And I went to Mr. Gibler multiple times probably and was like, hey, these are my options. I have a lot. What do you think is best? And what I'm saying is there are a lot of people here that will help you through those decisions. The school does a good job of trying to prepare you by giving you all the information that you need and giving you the right points of contact to delve a little bit deeper or further in if you need to do that. But it's not... It will cause stress, but it's not something worth stressing over too much.
Yeah, let's boil it down just really quickly because this is truly what we're trying to get at, right? It's how late do you want to work, right? What do you think is worthwhile working on? What's that extra master's or certificate going to get for you? What's the path? What's the 5-year plan? Those should be driving success for you.
Yeah, and I'm going to just add to that a little bit. I don't disagree at all with what was said, but it can be a little bit overwhelming for some folks. So much like the conversations we're having now in the staff group as they're getting ready to go out to their next unit, it's okay, what are you doing for your next unit? Are you pulling down the training guidance? Are you looking at the long-range training calendar, those types of things? This is no different. So you've got to do the same thing as you prep to come to CGSC. There's a 350-1 document out there that they probably get directed to in their welcome letter that the vast majority of the students don't read. Drives me crazy. So all this stuff, when they go to the presentations, they come out, oh, this is all new news to me. It's really not. The information's there. So and they're laughing because this is what I did all year long.
I'm not sure if I've seen it.
Yeah, thanks, guys. But this becomes that challenge: is if this is your profession, and I think we can have that conversation as well, because you're at the point in time in your career where is this your long-term profession or is this your job? And mindset's a huge part of it. And I was just talking to a different instructor earlier today, about a student they had that just didn't believe they needed to be here, didn't want to be here. It was a check the block. I got to do it because the Army told me I got to come. I don't think I'm going to learn anything. I just want to get back to the field. We have that in a percentage of students every year that way. That's not helpful, arguably. And I've had some students, none in this academic year in this staff group. Thank you very much. But I've had it in the past. But I have a lot of conversations about this is your profession. The Army has committed a year and quite a bit of money to pull you out of the force to allow you to study your profession and master components of your profession, give you opportunities to develop yourself. And I do think it is helpful coming here with an idea of what you want to get out of the year. Do you want to pursue SAMs? What does that really mean? Do you want to get an MMAS? What does that really mean? Look through 350-1, look through the course catalog, understand the structure of the organization. So when, as the SJ, I'm trying to explain it to you, they're going, okay, I don't understand. And that, I think, gets you on the right setting as a staff group and as an individual, helps remove some of the stress, helps you have some of those conversations if you're driving across the country, PCS in here, on flight, whatever. But if you don't do that, then it becomes kind of a last minute, kind of an RDSP kind of approach without the full mission analysis you've done beforehand. Just like anything, you're not going to write an order if you don't read an order that you just got, much like coming here. Read the order. Read the catalog. Read the base documents. Understand what this year's about. And then come and ask a bunch of questions. And there are focused questions at that point in time. You can start making some decisions. And then I think that reduces some of the stress and allows us to get at real learning quicker than if you kind of come in and fumble through it. Many people come here without ever having been exposed to joint doctrine or having never read the National Security Strategy.
Or barely had done any MDMP.
Yep. Or
been to a major field rehearsal or exercise.
And the number of folks that had not done a combined arms rehearsal in our staff group, which I thought was really kind of surprising. But again, all of that we're here to help solve as long as you have the right mindset and be open with each other, lean. I mean, the reason we structure the staff groups the way we do is because it gives enough representation of experiences, branches and sister service and international folks, where collectively you're exceptionally strong. Individually, you may have some weaknesses, but the advantage there is with the right mindset, giving away together, being there to learn, understanding that this is truly an investment that the Army is putting into you to make you a better military officer, better professional. And as mentioned, this could be the last PME you have before the War College. Yeah. And so when we talk field grade, many people think that's just KD. No, I mean, it's KD as a major. No, this is to give you foundations that push you all the way to your 06 rank.
So, Mr. Gibler, at the beginning, we talked about how CGSC is structured. And you talked about the core curriculum, AOC, and then you alluded to the electives. Can you talk a little bit more about what that period of the instruction looks like?
I can.
It's his favorite topic.
It is not my favorite topic. I can, but there's risk there. And for any of the listeners out there, you can listen or not, doesn't matter. You have plenty of time to have this conversation about electives. When students get here and the first questions I'm getting from students is about electives, which is 7 months down the road, my tolerance for that's a little bit limited because they've got a lot of curriculum to get through before that. And they got a lot of time to think through what they really want. And I'd argue when they get here, they don't know how all this stuff links together, and they won't really know what they want to get out of electives until they're in AOC. That's my opinion. But with electives, you can pursue a lot of things. You can pursue ASIs, Army Skill Identifiers, and you got one, two?
I got one, sir, yep.
Which one did you get?
Joint Planner.
Yeah, you got the Joint Planner one. There's strategic planning, there's joint, there's regional studies, there's Homeland Security, there's PDSIs, which are Personal Development Skill Identifier. There's Homeland Security electives. There's nuke electives, top secret electives that get after nuclear conventional integration, intelligence and space top secret electives. It gets you can do things like independent studies. So if you come out of all of Corps and most of AOC, I think then you know where your personal gaps are. You know where your personal kind of holes may be, and you can look at this slew of electives and say, can any of these help me kind of shore up that gap? What you also will probably know about that point in time is where your real unique areas of interest are. What would I like to deep dive into? And again, you can look at this slew and decide to go. There have been students here, and again, I think if you think through that too early, it's wasted effort, because I think you really need to work through Corps, you really need to work through AOC, do a good self-assessment, really see where you want to go and what you need out of that. But there are tremendous opportunities. There's a couple of students I've had that have done an independent study because they're pursuing a topic that they end up wanting to publish in the Joint Forces Quarterly or in a branch document. And now we've got the Harding Project. So the desire is to get us, the people in their profession, to get back into the publishing business, get back into driving thought, driving dialogue, driving conversation. And I've had a couple of students that have done an independent study that allowed them to deep dive into a topic. And then you had a bunch of folks that publish all the time around here that could coach and mentor them into, submitting an article for publishing. So I'm trying not to avoid your question. There's a lot of conversation about electives, but I would offer, don't put too much time, energy, and effort until after Christmas. And then I think you'll know, where you might want to focus your efforts.
And where you're going, right?
Your follow-on assignment might influence your decision on the electives as well.
Definitely.
I want to offer just one thing in this, and it's not because y'all are CAD, but this whole doctrine thing, and Ian kind of alluded to it. Don't read cover to cover. Blah. If you show up here, and this is me, and this is not going to surprise either of these two young men right here. If you show up here and you haven't read your Army's base doctrinal documents and you're not familiar with them, I think then you haven't embraced the profession, because you don't have a lawyer out there, you don't have a nurse practitioner out there, you don't have a name that person who believes they're a professional, and we are a profession that doesn't read the base documents and understand the base documents. So I think if you haven't, you need to, because then we're going to throw on top of that the joint doctrine. and we're going to dig into JP 5030, name all those. Joint doctrine informs service doctrine, and service doctrine informs joint doctrine. If you're not able to make those linkages when the course starts moving, and we'll get into this conversation soon, I hope, about the course moving, then you're missing an opportunity to grow and develop as much as you can. And I came from a different Army where we were very focused. We didn't have all those electronic devices to distract us, so we literally read doctrine. It was on my nightstand, and my company commanders required it of us, and that's what we did. I'm just not sure that mindset is the same now. And folks push back on me. I got a son-in-law who's a major who was here last year, not this year. And they'll push back and go, yeah, but look how busy we are. I said, okay, I get it. Not like we weren't busy. I deployed. I'm a Panama vet. I'm a Gulf War vet. I'm an Afghanistan and Iraq vet. So, and then throw into that all the other stuff. So it's not like we weren't doing stuff then as well. It's about the profession. You have to come here and believe you're a member of the profession, and believe the purpose here is to make you a better contributor to that. And doctrine's a huge part of it. And then the last plug I'll make on this, I'm a firm believer of the idea of innovation, the idea of change, the idea of pushing the boundaries. Much of that means you're going to push outside the bounds of doctrine, and you're going to get into a gray area of doctrine, or you're going to force a change in doctrine. You cannot do that responsibly without knowing doctrine. So I think it's an important piece that we in the school try to push, and hopefully the students gain some of that.
I think it's important as you develop in your staff group the way that you want your staff group to kind of function, the climate or culture of it, if you will, and that's going to be driven only in part by your SGA, mostly by the students also taking ownership of that. We've talked about mindset, is how much you're going to be willing to have those kinds of conversations that Mr. Gibler was just discussing in terms of, well, we keep talking about this in doctrine, but we're seeing something very different in current conflicts. Or we keep talking about this from a policy or doctrine perspective, and I think it doesn't make sense, or I think it really is the most important thing we should be talking about. Why are we talking about it more? We don't talk about deception, for example, very often, and yet it is a theme throughout almost everything that we do as far back as history. So there are a lot of options that Mr. Gibler is talking about. You have to be ready to come to challenge your own perspectives and ideas about what you think your role is and the role of the Army as well. And then you have to be able to challenge each other in a healthy, psychologically safe environment, and you'll really get a lot more out of this experience than if you were just here trying to check boxes.
I think the Harding Project really opens an opportunity for anybody who feels strongly enough to put pen to paper, right, to explore the gaps that you're bringing up about where we are in our doctrine, where we are in our training, and where we need to be, and why we have that gap there, and then to be intellectually brave about either making assessments, providing recommendations, how to mitigate those gaps. We talked a lot about the curriculum and what goes on in the college. Let's segue and talk about maybe some of the things that are happening outside of the school. The one thing so when I reflect on my time here at CGSC, studying, and then X100 still sends chills down my spine. We also had this looming thing called the marketplace hanging above our head and occupying a lot of our mental capacities in the fall. Mr. Gibler, can you talk about what the marketplace is and how students can approach that while they're grappling with the curriculum as well?
Yeah, I can attempt to. I never experienced it, so I'd left the Army by the time it was there. So much of what I know about it, I get through the students, and I get through my son-in-law and others. But it's that process in which these young officers now have to I would argue, look at the opportunities in front of them, assess themselves, and present themselves to commands to be considered either a 1-1, which is the unit says you're my number one pick, and I say that unit's my number one pick, and then say, yep, that influences where you're going to go after here. I struggle with truly understanding it because I never experienced it. But one thing I will offer is it is a stressor for the students. When the units come here, because there are windows in which units come here and do interviews. So a division will show up with either a GO or a colonel or kind of name that. And they come in and do interviews, and you get to sign up and say, yep, I'm going to go interview. And then you've got to sell yourself, for lack of a better phrase. I may be oversimplifying that. But you've got to prep yourself and do that in the middle of classes. When I say in the middle of, the interviews are after class most of the time. And we're mandated by our leadership that you can't let students go in class to go to an interview. And then units will show up and they'll say, hey, okay, if you can't see us, these are our windows. Hey, I've got class. Well, if you can't see us, okay. Well, what that means is then we're going to write you off, which I think is exceptionally unfair. But again, outsider looking in. So, I never, if I had a student come up to me and say, hey, sure, name this division, wants to do an interview, but it's in the middle of one of your classes, every time I said, okay, even though our leadership says you can't do that. In my opinion, that's a GL level discussion, not mine. Because I am not going to disadvantage a soldier or a young officer to have that opportunity. But boy, it's stressful. And I'm just watching the students go through multiple interviews. This interview didn't go well. It only is 1-1. And then as we get closer to having to lock that in, we're in the middle of some of the most, demanding parts of the curriculum. And the students are trying to have conversations with their spouses, with their significant others. They're trying to chart out their career path. For me as an outsider looking in, again, I don't want to give anybody the impression I've experienced this, because I haven't. To me, it's a challenge.
Well, I think you're describing the marketplace in general. The marketplace is just tough. What I think we're missing, though, is like the layered complexity that comes with CGSC. Right? Classes is one. Yes. Got it. Like, those that are good can handle it. What I tell my buddies now is, like, the added complexity of the brigade commanders being here, that's the next level. The face-to-face is already intimidating enough. Love it. Relish in it, right? But it's less than that. It's, if this brigade is here first, you have to provide an answer without going fishing in any other waters. That's the tough part. The marketplace usually opens, and you can strategically place your 1 through 5, and hopefully in that order of how you want to interview. Number 6 might be here today, and if he extends the handout, you better shake it, right? Like, that's a tough decision to make. I got buddies that said, hey, I think I'm going to wait for my 1 and 2 to their number 3, and now they got number 45, right? So
yeah, and then everyone's going to be different. I think that's the other challenge of the marketplace, is we could give advice right now on how it's going to look, and next year it will be different for all the residents that are here and everybody else out there. And then the individuals that are not here have a different experience. Having all the units come and be present, asterisk, not all, my number 1 choice was in Europe, so it wasn't possible for me to interview with them immediately or directly, and they didn't interview with me until after SAMS had already announced who was going to be on the SAMS list. That's another layer of complexity. If you're an individual thinking about trying to go to SAMS, you may have to make a tough decision. Hopefully we've talked about defining success and prioritizing, where you want to go and what that is. So some people are going to say no to number 2 or 3 or 4 and get 45. Some people will say no to number 3 or be honest with number 3 or 5, and they might get their number 2, depending on how it all shakes out. It's just difficult. You have to have a good relationship with your branch and understand and talk to them often and early how that really is going to look. And then the undercurrents, the things that can't be published in policy or emails and stuff, of what's really going on with the people you're talking with, and understand some of those points, those finer points, to get the most out of it and hopefully de-stress. But it will be somewhat stressful, because there will be people that are physically here, interview you, and in the interview might say, we really want you, come join our unit. And you're like, oh, man, but I have 10 other interviews I want to conduct to see. It's tough. You're going to have to be ready to make those decisions, or at least honest enough with yourself and the units, and be able to say confidently, can you give me 48 hours? That may work. It might not. You're going to have to kind of understand that. And I think that being honest with yourself, with your family, with the units that you're interviewing with, to as much as possible, is the best way to go about it, so that you take the most out of it and try and relieve some of the stress that it's going to cause.
As I hunt the good stuff, as I see the silver linings in my world, I feel like this is one of them where you're going, man, like I'm excited to go to the next person's team because I got to sit next to that person, hear the priorities, see where they're going, and kind of get excited about it. So
I think you keyed out on a good one. If the unit wants you, enough, if they're excited about you, then I've seen people change their mind about where they wanted to go because the unit showed, hey, you're exactly who we want, and that can change people's perspective. And as we push through that, it's a challenge to see because the stressors are there, but a good opportunity for y'all to kind of get a taste of what's coming.
Yeah, that was some good advice that I heard. Go where you're wanted.
Yep.
It didn't resonate until those interviews where you're like, I think this command team wants me to come there, and they're out here hunting for the right person. That makes you feel a certain way.
One of the best things you can also get out of this, which I wish more people that I talked to would have maybe taken advantage of this, is those interviews are also opportunities to network. All of CGSC, this is a theme you'll hear throughout this, is an opportunity to network. But I had really great conversations with colonels who I'm pretty sure weren't planning to hire me or were thinking about it, considering it. And yet I think the good impression that you can make in an interview also helps you get that connection, because you might not work for them at that unit this time, but the next PCS you may. So it's important to understand how to put your best foot forward depending on how many of these interviews or communications you're going to have.
Yeah, that's good, man.
Yeah, so this is a perfect lead into my next question. So you mentioned like a theme, right? A theme that you hear about CGSC. I think it would be worth discussing cliches about the best year of your Army career. So Major Davis, I want to start with you. What do you think about that cliche in particular?
Yeah, this is like the best cliche. I'm glad I get it.
Jealous?
Yeah, so jealous. I think for me, like, there's a couple cliches. I'm sure we'll talk about some of them today. I feel like they do damage a little bit to your expectations, and that drives what you perceive as your reality. And if those expectations and your experience don't match up, all of a sudden this is the worst place in the world, right? So whether it is the best year of your life or it's not, I mean, that's up for your debate personally. There's a lot of reading. There's a lot of MD&P, and there's a lot of classes, right? But if you're here to make yourself better, if you see these opportunities as what they are, to get a rep in, a free rep without the pressure and scrutiny of subordinates or your seniors, good grief. Like, this is truly a PME. If you look at it like that, I think you'll be better off for it.
Major Staley, the next cliche that I hear a lot is, it's only a lot of reading if you do it. What do you think about that?
Yeah.
So funny.
It's funny that I get this one because I think I genuinely try to read. This is one of my favorite because it's a little witty, but it's misleading. At the end of the day, we'll circle back to one thing I said earlier just so I give the wrong impression. You should absolutely read doctrine before you come here. You should understand it, not just be vaguely familiar with it, but understand your roles and responsibilities in that process. Skipping the readings during your time here at CGSC might not directly hurt your grades. Again, Mr. Gibler, just to make sure. But it will probably keep you from fully engaging with the class, with the material, with the instructor. And let's say this, not every instructor and every curriculum is all at the same level. So depending on how much you put into it and how much you can budget time to read or scan or skim or any other techniques out there that exist, there are a lot of really great techniques that people have, like getting those reading apps that allow you to listen to a document. You can plug in doctrine and read it, or the audiobook versions of doctrine that exist out there. And we keep saying doctrine. There's a lot of other reading that you're going to have to do. Being able to try and find ways to do that works for you is important. But that is, again, a lot of where the learning happens, is you being able to do the reading, synthesize, and then have that conversation that we talked about earlier in the podcast in class to try and push the boundaries beyond. The reading said, let's all do X, and then everybody in the staff group agrees X is a good idea. Did you really get a lot out of that class or the reading? Probably not. Let's have conversations about it, and you have to read to do that.
Yeah, I think just to jump on that, I think one of the things that people do say about this place that is true, is that the best part about CGSC is the relationships you make, the friends you make. For me, I challenge that a bit. I think it's your contributions to class. I think it's you sitting in a class and having at your fingertips the infantrymen or the ADA that we're talking about that's so rare that I didn't even know existed, right? Like, those are the expertise that you're reading about or pretending to be when you're back at your home station, where everyone's an engineer, so we're going to have to pretend that somebody's a logistician. You're like, no, in this class, there's a real one, right? Like, that's the best part for me. And it goes back to exactly what you're saying. If you're not doing the readings and you're not contributing, then they've just lost that facet of your specific staff group.
Yeah, I think both of those cliches, are the bane of my existence, to be honest with you. Yeah, if you've got somebody who came through here before this was his master's producing degree, before we made a shift at Alisco, before the Joint Staff did things what they did with the OpMap, then you can give advice that, hey, you'll be on the golf course at noon. That is not doing us any good at this institution. Agreed. If you are in that environment, that's not the environment we're currently in now. So it's not helpful. The Army's investing in you to come here for a year and study, so the intent is to study. Can this be the best year of your life? Much like Jesse and Ian said, if you approach it with the right expectation, the right mindset, a lot of things you won't be doing. I mean, you're not going to be undeployed. You're not going to be deployed. You're not going to go on TDY. You're going to be home every night unless you choose to be away. So the bottom line is that there's a lot of goodness in this year. Now, this idea of best year of your life, I would offer that's a stretch, because a lot of people have a lot of great years in their life that have nothing to do with the Army or nothing to do with CGSC. So I would argue, let's just not define it that way. The best years of my life are probably going to be in retirement. So, and then if we get after this, and I hate this thing, it's a lot of reading if you do it, because, and some of the advice I gave, because, I went to Command and Staff College, the Joint Command and Staff College in England, got a master's degree through King's College London. Then I went to the Army War College. And I'm not a fast reader. And I'm one of those folks that I was going to make sure I looked at every reading. And then I would rip an article, is what we kind of call it, where you look at the big ideas and you look at it compared to what the syllabus is going to be. And I allotted a finite amount of time, and I got it all done during that amount of time. Some at a lower level of fidelity than others, but I was able to at least bring the material together and compare them and draw some conclusions on the variety of readings based on what the course was trying to take us. If you're just reading to get through the words, but you're not thinking about it, then you're gonna have to pull yourself out of it. And maybe you scan, maybe you take a speed reading course. We've got those available. Maybe take one before you come. But I think both of those, in my opinion, it's only a lot of reading if you do it. In my opinion, is it and this is probably harsh. It shows an element of academic laziness, and it doesn't mean that you can't or shouldn't prioritize things in your life. But again, the Army's paying you all a pretty good salary to come here and study and learn. The taxpayer kind of expects that of you. And there are times where life's going to make you have to shortchange areas. When that happened, my students would just give me a yell, or, hey, this is what's going on in my life. All of the instructors are understanding life doesn't stop because of what's going on here. And I think you just work through it. Mindset, and again, get to know each other, have fun as a staff group. I would say social lives are pretty good around here. I mean, there's a lot of opportunity to do a lot of things. But those cliches are very damaging, I think, to allowing students to come here with the right expectation.
Okay, so as we wrap up our episode, I'd like to ask each of you if you have any advice to give to prospective students. Major Davis, we'll start with you.
Yeah, thanks, Pam. For me, this is kind of carrying on from my Captain's Career Course time. I found success really defining it up front, but also having the right mindset. And in this one specifically is don't overlook the point of this PME, whether it's Captain's Career Course or now CGSC, right? the point of CGSC for me is not to graduate at the top of my class. It's not to obsess over my grades, right? We're here shifting our perspectives to a higher level, operational, strategic. What we did then is not going to be the thing that helps us succeed later, right? And so there's a lot of growth here. There's a lot of change, much more than I thought from CGO to FGO. And this point of 10, 11 months of reflection helps you get there, or not, but it should. And I think if you're listening, you're going, hey, I want to stand out distinguished. You should. If that's your ambition, great. I would just add, right, each team has their own instructors, and they do a great job of pushing out rubrics to try to make the grading as objective as possible. That is very difficult from team to team to team. And so as I'm working tirelessly on my history paper, I get a good grade. I talk to my buddy. He gets a grade that I didn't know existed, right? It's super high. It is one of those things where I could obsess over the difference in graders that we are given, or I could acknowledge that there was great feedback in that paper, there was great growth in that reading, and understand that I'm better for it. And so that's kind of my take on PME in the Army is if you're obsessing over those .001s that differentiate you between, number 1 and number 10, or if you're looking at this going, hey, am I growing? Am I looking at my weak spots, my developmental needs, and am I building those? That's success. And so focus on learning and growth rather than just your GPA, and I think you'll avoid unnecessary stress.
I would say I think a lot of the points that we wanted to make have kind of been made up to this point, especially things that can't be overstated, though, would be coming here prepared, receptive, with the right mindset that you are not just expected to come read a lot, do some MDMP, try to absorb through osmosis or some other way all of the stuff that's going to be thrown at you throughout the course, but also contribute to the learning environment and the growth of everybody else around you. I think that's very important. Not that any one of us is necessarily the expert in any one thing, but we should be unexpert in our craft. If we are professionals and we've been doing this for 10 or so years, some of us a lot longer by the time they get here, I think that's important. There's this other big piece that I think is essential that we've touched on is the networking and the bonds that you generate with people while you're here is very important. As I mentioned earlier, I've been overseas for half of my career. The multinational aspect is incredibly important. And I think that just about everybody I've talked to in other staff groups have generated a really good rapport and bond with the multinational students that we've had through. I've got a really great relationship now with the Italian student that was sponsoring, but even the Bangladeshi officer that we had in our group, who is an awesome engineer. It's awesome that you have these experiences because then you get that other additional perspective that none of us are probably going to get. Even if I'd maybe go work, with the Marines for a little bit, I can speak a little bit of the jargon. I wouldn't know anything about how Bangladesh works engineering until I had that experience. So that's tremendous. That's huge. And it should just be not necessarily that you're going to go over then and go work in that country, that region, that environment, but how do you take that and open up your perspective, adjust your aperture more so that you can continue to grow and learn? I think that all of those relationships are incredibly important. And it goes back into what you're going to put into it before you get here.
Yeah, I really can't add much to that other than, this is a great opportunity for you to focus on your profession for a year. There's got to be some prep work before you get here. There's balance you can and should have while you're here. And part of that is just you got to limit kind of what you're willing to go after and want to go after. If you're struggling, reach out. Folks are here to help. But at the same time, the focus here is setting the stage for the Army's leaders for the next 10 years. And much of that is relationship building. It's getting together in neighborhoods and having barbecues. Much of it is really hard, open, respectful conversation in the classroom. And again, I think it'll be set if you approach it that way.
Gentlemen, I want to thank each of you for coming out and speaking to us today and sharing your experience with our listeners.
Yeah, thank you very much, ma'am, for having us here. We're excited to have been a part of this and at least give some information to incoming students and those that are interested in coming out here.
Yeah, thanks, Mel.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Just like writing new doctrine is a team effort, breaking doctrine takes a team. Without the crew and special doctrine division here at CAD, we wouldn't be able to bring you this show. The executive producer of Breaking Doctrine is Mr. Ted Crisco, and our editing and sound is provided by Mr. Zarek Fry of 29 Pixels Studios. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube, Apple, Audible, or Spotify podcasts, and follow us on social media at U.S. Army Doctrine to get updates on new podcasts, Doctrine Digest videos, and publications. Finally, the views and opinions expressed in this podcast do not necessarily reflect the official position of the United States Army, the U.S. Army Training and Doctrine Command, or the Combined Arms Center. I'm Lieutenant Colonel Jessamyn Jempson, and this has been Breaking Doctrine.